But why don't we begin with questions from the audience? Yes, please.
I have a really simple question.
Please stand up and identify yourself.
I have one. Can you hear me?
No. Press the top.
Can you hear me now? Again? Yes.
It's just one of those internet.
Yeah. Why don't you shout?
Shout.
My name's Lee Sugar, I'm an independent contractor, and my question is simple. Is trust a worthy objective, given all the challenges?
Who would, let's sort of determine an order about who would like to jump in on this. Yeah? Anyone
Sure.
else? Okay.
Trust is bad. It's not good, it's bad. Because from the point of view of a policymaker or an advertising copywriter, trust's a warm, fuzzy feeling. You trust your doctor because he's an old guy with a grey beard and there's a thing on the wall, right? But trust as an engineering concept is that somebody I trust is somebody who can break my security policy. The doctor can break my security policy because he can leak my medical records to the front page of The Guardian. So you should not talk about maximizing trust in systems, you should talk about minimizing trust. You should talk about minimizing the size of the trusted computer base. That's something geeks understand, but policy people don't.
So from a policy point of view, this is a very clear illustration of the challenges we have with vocabulary. I had a fascinating conversation on the word threat. And I think, was of course thinking of Batu Khan and the Golden Horde, and they were thinking of exploits. Trust is essential in a policy environment. I mean, we have this social contract. Societies have a conversation with themselves through their governments in a way. And what's trust in a policy environment? Trust is a value proposition reliably delivered. And so trust is not only bad, it's essential for the cohesion, not only of homogeneous societies, but more importantly for heterogeneous societies.
I mean, I think that trust is the problem is that here you can see two different visions of trust. Trust is a really controversial word, if you like. No? That's why I mean, at least in my case, I always try to talk about trustworthy in something. No, and at the end, it's just I would say that this equilibrium between privacy and security. I said how you manage both stuff at the same time, so that you, as a user, in some sense, or as a designer of a system, are able to make them compatible in some way. It's not always easy to make them be compatible in some sense, because some obviously you launch for one side and then you're getting the other one out there. So, but I don't think that. I mean, I think as Ross is saying in more controversial way, maybe not. I mean, maybe you really think that trust is a bad thing. But I think it's something that at least you need. At the end, you need to have some kind of understanding of what is going to happen with your system at the end. And that is part also of how it's going to be work from the security point of view. That's the point.
Yeah, I think, well, in the break, I had a short discussion with Bob Kahn, and he was saying that one of the persons that also was in the story, that sort of is a person called John Taylor. And he was important because, if I say, he had the trust, he said, of all the different parties and sort of fractions of, he could talk to policymakers, he could talk to politicians, he could talk to the post office people, he could talk to the trade union people, sort of. So he was a kind of person that had the trust between, that's really necessary when we look, what we need is some kind of regime change, if you want to sort of like that. It's very serious. If we don't do it, we're going to lose basically the source of our value, or let's say that it will be redistributed in such a way that not everybody has agency, and it's not at the moment sort of like a full transparent situation of who actually holds the identities on which all of us will be, to which we will be measured, and it's already happening as we speak. So, as we heard also, that the role of governments is getting really troublesome in that sense. Then we need some kind of stakeholder coordination between people who understand this in the system, And I would say these are the people who work at the passport office or at banks or sort of, so, and certain civil servants, and of course also a lot of the military. I was in a meeting 2 years ago in Rome, invited by the intelligence agency and also by the US State Department. It was talking about Internet of Things. It was like 150 intelligence professionals in the room. And when they came back, they had 5 major threats that they saw. 2 were do-it-yourself bio, which are groups are being monitored very substantially. 1 was only military, but the other 2, and this came from these 150 intelligence professionals, was the total breakdown of society because of the inability of the state to deal with the digital. This was 2 years ago, and this was an assessment I myself had made on the basis of simple thinking 10 years ago, sort of basically coming from like literature, sort of looking at things but I was very shocked basically to hear that this was the assessment of the intelligence professionals who realized in Internet of Things they can no longer do item level security. I can have a lily pad running in my t-shirt now. So what you want to do, strip everybody of their t-shirts. But they can also no longer safeguard this entire model called the state. So this, I would say there's a group of people everywhere in the world that sort of, let's say 50% wants to stay and go down, and the other 50 wants to open up negotiations with people who get it. And the people who get it are, of course, also a lot of hacker groups and a lot of people that are coding, and sort of we need to have new ways of opening up communications with a lot of people who understand the nature of what's going on, and then together build a new type of cybernetics. That's, I think,
Rob's answer may be precisely the reason why the national security establishment should not be our first port of call when trying to figure out security for our life online. The intelligence community has nearly zero interaction with people on an everyday basis. When you think about the national security types, of which the intelligence community, the military, foreign policy establishments, those are centralized, strategic, and top-driven enterprises. At least in Homeland Security, we were very transactional, decentralized, and bottom-driven. Now, it's not a culture of military intelligence, it's a culture of law enforcement and domestic political environment. We need new models, I absolutely agree. We probably only have time, though, for one more question in the back of the room. Can you identify yourself, please? Or not?
Vlado Hanjiski from the Technical University Berlin. So I'm a strong believer that if the technology is source of the problem, technology can be at least part of the solution. So maybe to Ross or to Rob just mentioned that in passing. Do you think that the blockchain here can play an interesting role in at least winning some of this? Yeah.
It's happening as we speak. I think there's lots of things going on in the financial sector and the banking sector. They're losing certain amounts of business that was basically also going, for example, with the fact that large companies are now putting up. So if you get your coffee for Starbucks, Starbucks is already identifying you on the basis of your pattern, and 90% of all the transactions are not being authenticated, but they sort of like going through there. So we have this, it's already what Jay was saying, we have this huge amount of things going on, and it's not good for nobody that there is no sense of order or agency in there. With that has a timeline, not just looking at now, but also looking at 20 years from now or 30 years from now.
Right.
So,
I tend to think that the Bitcoin blockchain is a bubble that burst about a year and a half ago when you had peak research and also peak value of the product itself. It's likely to tank in a year and a bit's time when the number of dollars that you get per hash that you find halves, because you'll no longer be able to pay the energy costs. And where we're working with practical stuff, like looking for ways to build better mobile purses in the third world for use with phone systems, we're using perfectly standard old-fashioned technology, but just coming up with new variants on the same theme and engineering it better. So blockchain, no, not going to bet on that. Sorry.
Time for one last question. Yes, over here on the side.
My name is Paulina Weigel, I'm from UCL. Ross, I mean, it was very convincing what you say, but what can we do? Is it actually possible to do anything to make for secure communication worldwide. What can one do?
Well, secure communications worldwide are easy if you trust Telegram.org, use their product. There are lots of people who offer secure messaging systems. My point is that that isn't the problem. The things that go wrong with Internet of Things have to do with monopolies, they have to do with fraud, they have to do with malware, they have to do with bad actors capturing regulators, they have to do with large powerful companies putting evil software deliberately into their products and the assumption that they're above the law. There are all these standard wickednesses of human societies that have been around since before the Bible was written, right? There's nothing particularly new under the sun. It's just that our policymakers and our policy enforcers think that they can have some kind of holiday, that they can take a break and they can say, well, crime is falling, aren't we wonderful? Actually, guys, it's just going online. And they decided to jimmy the figures so they wouldn't have to count the online stuff, so that they can bank the apparent drop in crime and award themselves all knighthoods. But this is just crap governance, right? What one has to do is hold the minister's feet to the fire.
This is very convincing, but what realistically can they do? Is there something that they can realistically do if they wanted to put money behind it?
Well, for example, the two safety problems that I talked about on about the second slide could be fixed if the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority had a board of directors that did not consist of retired chief scientists from drug companies, but instead had people on it like Ben Goldacre and Harold Thimbleby. I in fact went and spoke to the civil servant whose job was telling the minister which people to put forward for non-executive director posts, and he was absolutely appalled at the suggestion. He said ministers would never have it, the drug companies would make too much trouble. That's what's wrong. It's old-fashioned, broken politics that we've always had in London, that you've always had in DC, that you've always had everywhere else. The fix for it is transparency, the fix for it is lobbying, the fix for it is throwing the bums out at the next election. That's how you fix it.
Well, that is traditionally how democracy works. One initiative I can tell you about... Well, one initiative I can tell you about is that my organization, the Center for Internet Security, along with the DA's Office of New York, Cy Vance Jr., and London City Police, have launched a $50 million 5-year initiative in a public-private, member-owned, not-for-profit platform to identify and prioritize some of the challenges that we're facing and taking them on. I mean, we talk about eradicating hunger, and we're not kidding anybody. We can do better in this field, certainly. Anything else from the audience? It's time, I'm afraid. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panelists.